Right, in this video, I'm going to talk about just muscles and some types of contractions and how best to learn muscles. So we talk about muscles, we typically talk about origin, insertion, action, and nerve. Origin is can be also referred to as a proximal attachment, and insertion could also be referred to as a distal attachment, because usually that's how they are. And then actions, and then the nerve. So when you're learning the muscle, the first thing I tell students is to just kind of get an idea of where it is. You know, is it on the front? Is it on the back? Is it on the side? Try to find it just on yourself. Get a feel for kind of where it is. How large is it? Does it tend to go up and down? Does it tend to go at an angle? Just kind of get an idea of where it is. And then it's a good idea to maybe just get an idea of what the action is, okay, and get a sense of kind of where it is before you go back and worry about the exact origin, the exact insertion. As a general rule, when we talk about muscle action, we talk about the insertion being pulled towards the origin. So for example, a muscle that comes from, say, the scapula and goes to the humerus, okay, it's going to pull the humerus towards the scapula, just as an example. So when you're learning the muscles, what you really want to concentrate on is the distal attachment, okay, or the insertion. That's the bone that it's going to mobilize. So if the distal attachment is on the scapula, it's going to move the scapula. If the distal attachment is on the humerus, it's going to move the humerus. So it's always that distal attachment that's going to be mobilized. And if you know the origin and the insertion, even generally, you should always be able to figure out the action. Okay, so typically, Newman calls it stringing it up, but you can represent a muscle by a string. So just to go with a very easy example, the deltoid muscle is going to come from lateral third of the clavicle and the acromion and spine of the scapula. So kind of, if it's got multiple insertions, just kind of pick a spot in the middle, and it goes to the deltoid tuberosity. Okay, so the middle deltoid anyway is just kind of a straight line, goes straight over the joint. If you were going to pull the insertion towards the origin, okay, again, the distal attachment is the humerus, how's it going to go? It's going to go that way. It's going to go up, or superior, which is also known as abduction. So a good way to learn the muscles is look at the origin, look at the insertion, put a string on it, okay, and then try to visualize how is it going to move. You can also do it on yourself. So the deltoid is a pretty superficial muscle. It's pretty much right here, from up here to here, and kind of visualize on yourself how does it move. One of the things to keep in mind is that when you're doing this in a lab is that the skeletons are not really set up for this kind of movement. So in this case, it's freely mobile, but a lot of the joints are not, and if you really force it, you're just going to break them. So you need to be able to kind of visualize the line of pull, especially it's why I recommend students kind of doing it on yourself, and then you get a good feel, you know, literally you can kind of feel the muscle and get a better idea of how it is. But again, if you know the origin and the insertion, you should be able to figure out the actions. So it's not so much straight memorization. The other thing you need to know is the nerve. In a lot of parts of most of the body, the nerves are really organized in a very systemic kind of way, and certain parts of a nerve are innervate certain parts of the body, or they go with certain motions, and it actually can be very helpful in remembering what does what. The shoulder is a little different. The shoulder comes off the brachial plexus, and it's a little trickier. But other parts of the body, the forearm, the wrist, and the lower extremities, they follow a pattern, and it can be really helpful to learn that when you're trying to learn the muscles. So I want to talk a little bit about types of contractions. So we talk about 3 types of contractions: concentric, eccentric, and isometric. So isometric, iso means the same, refers to the length of the muscle, the same length. So that's a case where you are, the muscle is active, okay, but it's not actually changing in length. So a good example is when I push against the mat here, nothing's moving, right? No joints are moving, but I'm contracting my muscle, okay? Or even when I'm holding my arms up like this, right? I'm contracting my muscles to hold it up, but nothing's actually moving, okay? There's no change in the muscle length. Iso, same length. So that's an isometric contraction, okay, where you have a contraction, but there's not any actual movement. And just a word on I mentioned the word contraction. So technically the word contract, it means to shorten, right, to get smaller. And that's not what happens in an isometric contraction or an eccentric contraction. But just by convention, people will use the word muscle contraction, whether they're talking about the muscle staying the same length, shortening or lengthening. The word contraction is used interchangeably, okay? So concentric contraction is kind of what I just demonstrated. That's a shortening, all right? And when we think of muscle activity, the way we sort of determine what a muscle does, we think of it shortening, okay? Pulling that insertion towards the origin. Eccentric contraction is a lengthening, the muscle getting longer. Now, the important thing to remember about eccentric contractions is that it's not magically getting longer. Usually it's returning from a shortened position. So what do I mean by that, all right? When I flex my elbows like this, it's my biceps, right? You can feel it on yourself that your biceps are contracting the muscle, right? It's flexion against gravity, concentric contraction. What happens if I slowly lower my arms towards the ground? Okay, that's extension, and your first thought is, oh, that's my triceps muscle, that's the muscle that extends the elbow, which is true, but you can probably feel on yourself when you go slowly with gravity that it's actually your biceps are still active, okay? Whenever you move controlled against gravity, and you notice it especially when it's slow, but really any control, this is true for any controlled activity, it's what's called an eccentric contraction, okay? So when I flex like this, right, my biceps is already shortened, okay? As I slowly lower it, it's lengthening to return to the to this position, all right? Another example, okay, when you go, when I go to stand up here, what's mainly active at my knees? My quadriceps, right? They shorten in order to straighten out my knees. What happens when I go to sit? Okay, where do you feel it? Okay, if you don't believe me, try it. Okay, even though when I sit, I'm flexing my knees, what's controlling that flexion? It's not my hamstrings, okay? It's my quadriceps, okay? So when I go to stand up, they shorten. It's a concentric contraction against gravity, okay, to hold me up here. But when I go to sit, okay, they're going to lengthen. They're going to allow myself to sit down. Students have a really hard time with eccentric contractions. It can be very confusing. Things to remember about concentric and eccentric is that concentric is always going to be against gravity, okay? Eccentric is always going to be with gravity, okay? It just happens that the way that we can control our motions is by slowly lowering kind of that prime mover. Now the other thing is true is that if it's if I really forcefully extend my elbows back like this, even though it's with gravity, that would probably be my triceps. That'd probably be a concentric contraction. But whenever it's controlled, okay, even if it's not really slow, whenever it's controlled motion, it's an eccentric, and that's a lengthening. Okay, and again, the muscle is not magically increasing length; it's really just returning to a previous position, kind of from that shortened position. So that's eccentric contraction. So again, isometric, same length, no change, but the muscle is active. Concentric, against gravity, and eccentric is going to be with gravity. And that's some notes on muscles.